In the course of an artistic creation, an artist is always looking for a subject to describe, subject to put in their creation. If a painter paints themselves, it will be a self-portrait. Rembrandt is one of the most famous. He produced 40-something paintings of himself. Each one shows a different stage of his life. I'm always fascinated how eloquent the painter can express the emotional nuance among them. Instead of a painting, we can write a story about ourselves. Then it becomes an autobiography. It can be a long novel or song or even a poem. The writer tells the facts and happenings of the life, but the narrative should go with emotions. This is the way that connects readers to somebody else's life. An autobiography gives us the first-hand account into somebody else's life. The writer should tell the facts and happenings of the life, but the narrative should go with emotions. This is the way that connects readers to somebody else's life. A protagonist may be the writer himself. My favorite novel, David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, for example. Well, actually, this is a book that I learned English from. The protagonist is Dickens himself. He incorporated many elements of his own life, like working in a wiring factory as a child and the later career as a journalist and a writer. There are typical villains and obstacles to overcome like every other story. In the original novel, Dickens offered a great insight how the experiences have shaped him as a person. The detailed depiction of the unique characters make them attractive and keep holding the viewer's attention. Today's main topic is not writing, but a visual artist who captured the true beauty of the storytelling from her own life. Louise Bourgeois is a French-American artist from the 20th century. Her main focuses were sculptures and installation works. Probably the most famous work is the gigantic spider sculpture. She got inspiration from her own life and devoted herself to reproduce each moment and emotion from the life event. Her depictions of life story is not one of self-portrait painters, but more like an autobiographical writer. Bourgeois had a strong connection with textiles and needleworks that trace in her childhood. Her father was a tapestry seller in a gallery located at Saint-Germain, Paris. Since the early age, Bourgeois helped her parents preparing drawing and repairing. This was her first contact with art. When she became an artist, Bourgeois found a meaning in the process of textiles production. Weaving and repairing were her mother's profession, and also it was a metaphor for breaking and fixing the entangled family relationships, particularly with her father. Bourgeois left France and lived in New York with the American husband who she met in Paris. The nostalgia led her to the production of some works related to the hometown. Celle Choisy was named after Choisy-le-Roi, where her family had a tapestry workshop. The Aux Vieilles tapestries were a placard actually hung outside the father's gallery. A guillotine mounted above conjures up the tensions that permeated her family's situation. The artist devoted a large part of the life to overcome the trauma from the family life. Her tyrannical father, Louis Bourgeois, and his affair with an English teacher hired for young Louise. Bourgeois was deeply affected when she found out the affair, and she felt abandoned by the father ever since. The installation work, The Destruction of the Father, represented her childhood dark fantasy. In the imagination, she threw the adulterous father into the cave, mysteriously glooming inside, and he was devoured and swallowed. It's a little bit nasty. Bourgeois was an anxious woman, but she did not admit it publicly. It was only the art creation that enabled her to do so. She hated to call it art therapy, but she calls it exorcism instead. No matter how she called it, the art creation is the way she overcame the prolonged trauma that she suffered from her childhood. Bourgeois was considered as a feminist, even though she denied it. Saint-Sébastien reflected her feminist view, for example. The painting was based on Saint Sebastian, a Christian saint who was believed to be shot to death with arrows. In classical paintings, Saint Sebastian was depicted with iconographic arrows and his tied arms. In the bourgeois version, the saint was turned into a female figure without head and arms. She put an excessive emphasis on the feminist trait. The arrows stuck on the body parts under the skin conjured up the vulnerability of female conditions. Possibly, such conditions of exposure to the danger was a reference to her own fragility. On the death of her father in 1951, she began a psychoanalysis to overcome the trauma, which lasted almost 30 years. Le défi was a movable rack full of glasses. If you push the rack, you would slide on the attached wheels. The glasses would fall in pieces. Bourgeois was seeing her life as a balancing act that could be easily harmed if a little pressure was given. Bourgeois' mother, Josephine, was a strong woman who gave young Bourgeois a sense of protection. Josephine passed away when Louise Bourgeois was only 21. The large sculpture of Maman, or in English, Mom, produced in 1990s, were her salvation from the lifelong fear in the absence of the mother. A spider game of protection. It weaves nets that could catch unwanted little bugs. This was how Bourgeois considered the mother, and the sense of protection was what she yearned for in response to her fragility and anxiety.